I had the opportunity to call Glenn, which shouldn't take much work on your end to investigate if you're truly interested on who he is and the background behind his journalism. He was largely responsible, the most probably responsible, for all of the articles out there that are pumping out left, right, and center, and even parroted right on to this day, that would insult, demean, and damage anyone that would suggest that the dinosaur human footprints were real.
This is the famous Taylor Trail, perhaps the most renowned trail of alleged human tracks and promoted. But then there are many of these elongated tracks that were mistaken by many locals and creationists, especially years ago, for human tracks or giant man tracks, as they sometimes called them. This was a very famous set of tracks here because you had an alleged human track overlapping a deep and obvious three-toed dinosaur track. Ironically, there was an accusation made that I may have destroyed this track. Well, it's not destroyed. There's no human track to destroy. It's a dinosaur track.
He did have advertisements that he did paintings and artwork for commissions, which was the context of the phone call. Richard Dawkins, BBC documentary buddy, on the issue of getting rid of this pesky problem of the dinosaur human footprints. I was trying to get Glenn. Yeah, Glenn. This is my name's Trey. Do you have a few minutes, or did I catch you at an okay time?
I can talk.
I wanted to. Honestly, I wanted to talk to you about two things. I wanted to see if I could if you had time to maybe look at a couple of drawing ideas that I had, that I was looking for somebody to do, if you're still doing that kind of thing.
What do you have in mind exactly?
A couple of things dealing with dinosaurs, actually.
For an article or book?
Or if you could consider it.
I'd like to hear more about it. What exactly you want drawn, and so tell me more about it.
Well, let me ask you that. Did you used to do the presentations about the dinosaur footprints, didn't you, in Glen Rose years and years back?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've been studying the tracks there for over 30 years. And
did you ever get to meet? Have you ever met Richard Dawkins?
oh yeah, many years ago he came down with the BBC to film the Biloxi tracks and do a little piece on the controversy about the human footprints, and so he interviewed and filmed me and Ron Hastings and did a little piece on us there. So that was, I'm trying to think, probably 25 years ago, maybe. Something like that.
Well, I tell you what. So that was 25 years ago. That time flies by.
In the 1980s, probably, when he came down. I first published my longer articles in the early and mid 1980s, and I believe he came down, shortly afterwards. So it might have been 85, 87.
Well, you did some. It's really nice that Richard was, involved in that kind of stuff. You did some of the, I had looked at your stuff and the presentations that you put together, arguing against those footprints being young. Those were those were bar none, the most stellar presentations on the topic that I can find.
I appreciate that. Put a lot of time and work into it, and like I said, I've been for many years working on a full-length book on the subject. It's just going very slow and keeps getting longer. I should put into it probably. But I'm pretty much done with all the documentation I intend to do in the Biloxi. Many of the tracks are broken away or badly eroded now, and the Taylor site.
Broken away is an understatement, and absolutely right. Here is just one of the tracks. Here is the human footprint, which is inside of dinosaur steps, human steps. These guys are running from something, apparently. Whatever the case, here's what the footprint looks like before. You've got a string of these. Here's what the footprint looks like before. This is the identical footprint afterwards. And that's rock right there. Whatever happened to these footprints had to happen so viciously that it changed that to that. But to me, that's amazing that to even think about that you're working with figures like Richard. I respect him more than I could possibly express. I wanted to talk to you. Yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting. At that time, my own views are kind of still evolving, and even though I had, kind of spearheaded the refutation of the human footprints there, I was not that long out of college and still, refining my own views. And, for a while I was kind of buying into some of the creation stuff, and then soon realized the earth was very old, and then also, before too long, came to fully accept evolution and the rest of it.
Yeah.
When Richard came down, I remember I was still a little undecided about some things, so we had some spirited discussions about all that, but we were in total agreement about the footprints, because, that was kind of the gist of my work, was refuting what the footprints are. Actually, I could go
refuting the dinosaur human footprints like it was taken awfully seriously. Now remember, we went from the argument of that the human tracks were carved to our new argument, which would be that you would be stupid to even believe that those were human footprints, because after all, take a look at that. I mean, after all, as Mr. Dawkins would so aptly say, who could possibly believe, looking at that kind of thing, that it was actually a human footprint?
But most tracks aren't that clear-cut. Time has eroded them. Sediment has filled some in. You wouldn't think anyone in their right mind would mistake these for man tracks, yet this is exactly what's happened. Glenn Cuban on the left and Ronnie Hastings are two independent researchers who spent several years trying to convince the gullible that there's a less exotic explanation for the variability in these tracks.
Two tracks that are slightly raised, like the dinosaur footprints, but you can see that they match on either side, but the one on the right looks like something stepped in the back of it, doesn't it? And it's depressed, it's not raised. We'll see there is that duck-shaped dinosaur track that matches the one next to it perfectly, but again, the depressed track within it is just perfect. And if we had enough dark, you could actually count the knuckles and the toes here. And that's in a sequence of 15 in a right-left pattern. Okay, you want some more evidence? It just keeps piling up, and they keep evading.
We discovered that the eye of faith can see almost anything it likes in the bed of the Paluxy River. The creationists were fooled by a pathetically small resemblance to a human foot. The random forces of physics, erosion, has worked on the rock to produce such varied shapes that the eye of faith and imagination can see almost anything. A religious quest that is as alive today as it was in the early days of opposition to Darwin himself. Because people cannot come to terms with evolution, the blind designer, making all the diversity and complexity of life that they prefer to believe was created by God.
Now, Richard, I just want to make sure that I understand you clearly there. Now, evolution, that is your pronunciation of the words, get real stickler about definitions. In my opinion, that's usually to dodge the substance and get caught up in the definitions. For example, I say monkey, they say ape, I say tomato, you say tomato. But on this particular word here that you're stating, the evolution, which you are upset that more people aren't converting to fast enough. The actual definition of this word that you're saying, evolution, so this word, Lucian, that you're telling me you believe in, this is a bright or shining lizard, serpent, or reptilian creature, or some type of entity.